It's at the Kansas City Convention Center downtown.
Yeah.
All right, we are lucky enough to be hosting Betsy Fogle, one of my favorite elected representatives to ever talk to. I've been fortunate enough to do this with roughly a dozen candidates. You and I have done this 4 or 5 times. We started back in COVID. Now you get to actually be in our grill and talk to us a little bit. Anyway, she'll be visiting with us. She is a Democrat that represents part of Springfield, the part of Springfield you're looking at right now momentarily. Maybe you can describe the district to us. She's going to talk a little bit about the time she spends, the time she spends in office, what that is like, talk about, a little bit about her politics, and then the real fun stuff is that we get to have a conversation with her, which is my favorite part of this whole thing. All right, round of applause, ma'am, your floor.
Thanks, everybody. I'm Betsy. I serve as state representative in House District 135. I'll scoot over. You see a picture of my House district. So I represent the northeast quadrant, basically, of the city of Springfield. So do you guys know where Mercy Hospital is? Basically everything that falls north and east to the city limit both directions. And then I carve out right here, this little section that gets lumped into mine is where Missouri State is. So I have most of the campus of Missouri State. So where we are right now is not in my House district, but if you live on the other side of National, I'm your state representative, and hopefully I've had the chance to meet you. I was first elected in 2020, so that was kind of a chaotic environment to campaign in, as you can imagine. COVID hit, and a few months later I was on the ballot, so trying to figure out how to pivot and knock doors, but keep everybody safe, and then phone call instead of knocking doors, which was kind of a crazy time to get in politics. But was elected, fortunately, that November of 2020, and became the second elected Democrat in the lower half of Missouri. So as you can imagine, we have quite a few Democrats in the St. Louis area and the Kansas City area, because those tend to be a little bit more Democratic leaning. I was the second one elected in the lower half of Missouri, and serve in Jefferson City. Obviously that's our state capital. I serve in the House. You know this, there are 2 branches of government that operate out of the Capitol. Well, 2 branches in the area that I serve in. We have the House and then we have the Senate. I am one of 163 members of the House of Representatives. I am one of 52 Democrats, so I definitely serve in the minority. Most elected officials in the state that we're in now are Republicans. Over in the Senate, there are 34 senators, 10 of which are Democrats. All of our statewide elected office holders are Republicans. So when I'm in Jefferson City, my role looks a little bit different. Have you guys had any of my Republican colleagues come in and speak yet? I know sometimes
Not yet.
you bring them in. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Representative Stinnett will be visiting with us
Awesome.
after Springfield.
Wonderful. So you'll probably get to hear about how our experiences in Jefferson City are slightly different just based on what side of the aisle we sit on. So when I'm in Jefferson City, because there's so few of us, it's a lot harder for me to get my bills referred, right? It's a lot harder for me to kill bad bills that I don't like. We do a lot of stuff that's bipartisan in nature that both Republicans and Democrats support, or both Republicans and Democrats are opposed to. Typically what you guys hear about back home aren't those bills, right? You're gonna see us standing up on the House floor yelling at one another. Or you're gonna see the more controversial things that we talk about in Jefferson City. But there's a lot that we work together on, and I know Representative Stinnett will touch on some of those things too. A little bit about me, my background is in public health. I worked at a place called Jordan Valley Community Health Center. Anybody know what that is? Yep. It's a health center close to here that provides medical, dental, and behavioral health services to low-income residents. So we provided primarily to patients on Medicaid or who didn't have insurance. That's what launched me into a career in politics, or not a career, hopefully, probably just a few more years, but enter into politics because for several years I was the person that when a family would come in or when a student would come in and they would need, they had an abscessed tooth that was causing them pain but didn't have insurance and couldn't afford it, I'd just say, I'm sorry, we can't help you today. When a family would come in and mom just lost her job, she was trying to figure out where her bills and rent were going to come from, but she couldn't find any jobs because no one was hiring and she lost her car and didn't have transportation. I would sit down with that family and try to figure out how do we get you from A to B. And doing that very much made me see all the gaps that we have in our state that uplift working families back home. So decided to jump in, run for office. I've been serving this is my 4th year. In Missouri, you can serve 4 2-year terms, so I'm back on the ballot every 2 years. I'll be back on the ballot this November, as will all of my House colleagues. I will admit, I love policy. I love being in Jefferson City. I enjoy the campaign side a little bit less. As you guys can imagine, politics is not always pretty. And from August through November, when you turn on the TV, when you turn on the radio, you're gonna hear what? Political ads, right? When you get on your phone and get on Facebook, you guys probably aren't on Facebook, let's face it, you're on like all the other cool things. all you're gonna see is political stuff. Anybody watch the State of the Union last night? A little bit? Yeah, so it's gonna be like that, but on steroids for the next several months. So back on the ballot in November, I love serving in Jefferson City. I love debating policy. I love feeling like I get to do stuff to move our community forward. Equally sure politics is not a life for me. Brings out the best in humanity and the worst in humanity, and I'm thankful I get to do it now, but looking forward to getting back to a career in public health whenever that day comes. So that's a little bit about me. Happy to answer any questions. There's nothing off the table. Well, from my perspective, your professor might have a slightly different take on that, but these conversations are meant to be honest in nature. You can ask anything about the campaign side, about the political side, about the legislative side, and we can just see where it goes.
Let me start with a few questions, and then as we see fit, we can open it up to the floor. First of all, you are a Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
Why that political party and not some other political party?
Yeah, so in my family, anytime people come up to my parents and say, oh, you must be so proud of your daughter, she won an election or she got involved, my mom's response is always, oh, I'd be much more proud if she ran as a Republican. I came from a very long line of Republicans. All of my family lives in rural Missouri. They cattle farm down in Berry County. I just happen to be a Democrat because my beliefs align more with the Democratic Party. I think that diversity is a good thing. I think that my community is stronger when my neighbors are healthier. I think that the role of government should be limited, but it should also provide a safety net to my neighbors when they need it. I think that people should be able to love who they want to love, marry who they want to marry without the government having a say in that. I think what happens in your doctor's office should be your business, and those are things that align with the current Democratic Party, and decided to run as a Democrat because that's just how my heart and mind feel.
So I will ask you, I'm going to do my best to only ask you one national question. I can't help it though, but
Fair.
I know you get right of refusal at all times.
Okay.
You were sworn in on January 6th, 2021. January 6th, 2021 is a notorious day for other reasons. We currently have one of our candidates for president. He is under, criminal investigations are over. He is now facing criminal trial. And pending the Supreme Court ruling, these may be delayed and delayed and delayed. Now, I'm of two minds, and I kind of want to know how you feel about it. First of all, ma'am, I really don't like the idea of a criminal trial during a campaign. I feel like it could unduly influence one way or the other. At the same time, we're voters, and we deserve full information on the candidates we're voting on. So have the trial. I don't care if it's inconvenient. So I'm of both minds. Where do you come down on this debate? And obviously, he's a Republican, but if we could just magically flip it over to a Democrat.
Absolutely.
And a Democrat gets criminally convicted.
Yeah.
Is that a vote killer for you specifically?
Yeah, well, I think it's important. First of all, I'm going to back up and address what you said first. You can imagine how surreal it was. I was in the chamber in Jeff City, being sworn in, swearing an oath to the Missouri Constitution, to the U.S. Constitution. My neighbor leans over to me, who happens to be a Republican. I don't know anybody. This is day one, right? She leans over and she says, oh my gosh, they took Pelosi's office. They have her computer. They're not, the Capitol is shut down. I have no idea what she's talking about because I put my phone up because, I'm sitting there like, oh, heck yeah, I'm getting sworn in today. And so I'm like, what is going on? And all of a sudden, everyone starts talking. You look up in the galleries, everybody starts moving. The security starts closing the exits because people are fearful that something's going to start happening in the Missouri Capitol. There were protesters outside that were saying the election was stolen. It was just a very weird moment. It was handled very well by everybody. Nothing happened, thankfully, in the Missouri Capitol, but it was very surreal when I am pledging my oath to the Constitution to defend it at all costs and then seeing what was happening in D.C. So I think the second point I'll make is it's important to remember that this isn't a partisan issue. If a Democrat elected did, in my mind, what former President Trump did, I would have equally grave concerns about the actions that took place that day. So I do think it's very important that voters have all the information. I also think it's very important that something isn't used for political gain. And quite frankly, guys, that's really hard to keep separate, right? The timing of a trial, what happens, how we talk about it, what lens do we view it through. It's almost impossible to keep that from the campaign side because that line between policy and campaign is so blurry. I think it's important that voters have the information that they need, but I also think it's equally important that we have a justice system that works. People in this country are innocent until proven guilty. But I would echo, or I would also note that the criminal justice system or the justice system has worked already, and former President Trump has been convicted of crimes. So it's up to the voters. I don't think that people should be stripped off the ballot. I think that's up to us, and I think you should be able to go to the ballot and vote for whoever you want. That is a central component of democracy and the thing that makes this country the greatest country in the world. But it needs to be done in a way where voters have the information that they need to make the most informed decision.
I have a hot take for you. When it comes to this election coming up in November, the biggest thing that we'll be voting on will not actually be you. It will not actually be the governor of Missouri. And it might not actually be any of these issues we've seen. I've signed a couple petitions for here on campus. Instead, there is a concerted effort right now in the General Assembly to completely change, or at least modify, how initiative petitions work.
Mm-hmm.
What are these, and what are they chewing on changing? And how do you feel about it?
Yeah. So have you talked about that initiative petition?
We have mentioned that here in
class?
Missouri, we, the voters, have the ability to run a petition, get it on the ballot, and we
Okay.
can vote on it almost like an end around of the General Assembly.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna ask you guys a few questions. You don't have to answer them, but to show how initiative petitions work in our state. Anybody smoke recreational marijuana or do gummies? You don't gotta raise your hand. Does anybody have health insurance because they're eligible for Medicaid? Does anybody, is anybody impacted by minimum wage law? Those are the types of things that get done because voters in this state were fed up with me and my colleagues in Jefferson City not taking action on something. And so voters can put something on the ballot, and it requires a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of money. Go gather signatures from all across the state and put an item on the ballot that you guys can go vote on directly. Usually, I think it's an important part of the conversation, the issues that get passed through the initiative petition process usually benefit what political party do you think? The one in the majority or the one in the minority? No wrong answers.
Could be either or.
Could be either or. I would argue that oftentimes it's issues that the majority doesn't support, because if the majority supported them, they would just pass it through statute, right? So things like recreational marijuana, that's not very popular with my Republican colleagues. Democrats tend to be more in favor of that. The people of Missouri wanted it, Republicans weren't doing it, so the people went around the legislature to enact that policy change. We did it with medical marijuana first and then recreational marijuana second. Similar with Medicaid expansion, that was on the ballot with me in 2020. That was one of the most controversial things at the time. Republicans campaigned against it, Democrats campaigned for it. You guys are the voters, some of you are probably too young in 2020 to vote, but we're able to go and put it on the ballot, and now that's the law of the land because voters wanted it. Right now in Missouri, initiative petitions have to pass with 50% plus one of the vote. So a lot of things like Medicaid expansion passed with 53% of the vote. Recreational marijuana, some of those things passed with like 50 to 58% of the vote. So what we're doing in the legislature right now is trying to raise that threshold from 50% to 2/3 majority, or 50% to 58%. There are different versions moving around. Basically what that means is it would be harder for you guys to go around us in the legislature to get stuff done. Right now, Republicans are very much in favor of IP reform, initiative petition reform, because again, the issues that are passing, they don't like. But in Democrat-led states, conservative initiative petitions are passing because Democrats have all the power. So Democrats are doing the same thing in Democrat-led states that Republicans are doing here and trying to make it harder for people to get stuff done that maybe the majority party doesn't like. So my only comment to that would be, I think it's number one, important to remember that both political parties use it as a way of retaining their power. I'm a firm believer that the closer we can make decisions to the people, the better. I don't want my colleagues in Jefferson City making decisions about local school board issues. I think that's best at the school board level. I don't want my colleagues to make it harder for you guys to go get something done through the initiative petition process that you really want, that maybe the majority party doesn't agree with. When the pendulum swings back, so Democrats had all the control in this state 25 years ago. The pendulum's gonna swing back, right? One political party gets too big, they start fracturing, the pendulum moves back to the middle. Tale as old as time. When that happens, Republicans who voted for IP reform are gonna be frustrated because they can't get their stuff done because they made it harder. So I think those would be my comments, and my frustration with it is it should be equally as easy for you guys to change things in this state as it is for me and my colleagues. A bill has to pass the House with 50% plus one of the votes. We don't have a 2/3 majority. We have to pass things with just a simple majority. It should be equally as easy for you.
So, man, there's a couple other issues that are real hot right now in this state. One of which, maybe one of the biggest issues, is that a couple summers ago, the Supreme Court reversed Roe v. Wade, or didn't revert it, they undid it. And as a result, Missouri became, how would you describe it? Essentially, they have effectively banned abortion in
Yeah.
the state.
Yep.
Where do you feel, how do you stand on that particular issue? And what legislation are they chewing on now? I heard there was like a year or two ago, they were chewing on legislation to ban pregnant women from leaving the state. I know that didn't go anywhere. That seems draconian. But birth control legislation, contraception legislation, what are your, where are we
Great
going
question.
with that?
So in the political world right now, this is probably, and will always be and always has been, one of the most polarizing topics, right? People use these terms of pro-choice or pro-life, and there's very little room for people to have nuanced conversation around a woman's access to reproductive health care. So to set the stage a little bit, when Roe was overturned, Missouri a few years prior had enacted what's called a trigger ban, basically saying if Roe v. Wade was overturned, effective immediately, abortion would be completely outlawed in the state of Missouri, and that's exactly what happened. Within 24 hours of Roe being overturned, our elected statewide officials here signed that ban into place. Abortion became illegal across the board, with no exceptions for rape, for incest. There is language in there that says if the life of the mother is at risk, then an abortion can be provided. But that is very loose terminology, and what you'll hear physicians say is they're very scared of the liability of providing an abortion for somebody who maybe has a non-viable pregnancy, and stop me if I'm using terms that aren't familiar to you guys, but has a non-viable pregnancy and they know it's never going to result in a live birth, but until that woman is quite literally bleeding out, that doctor's hands are tied. We've seen several lawsuits across the country from women who have gone into hospitals. One was at the State of the Union last night, if any of you watched that, have gone into hospitals needing life-saving care, and the physicians have told them, I am so sorry, the laws in the state prohibit me from providing it. So I say all that to say, it is a nuanced conversation. It is very nuanced. There's nothing more nuanced than a family's decision to grow or not. There are a million reasons why a woman would get an abortion, right? Sometimes it's because there's a fetal abnormality, sometimes it's because it's an unviable pregnancy, and quite frankly, sometimes it's because that's that woman's choice, and I don't think it's the role of the government to step in and take it away. Now that abortion is outlawed in the state of Missouri, that pro-life contingency, and I use that term in air quotes because I think it is sometimes misleading, but is continuing down that path to say, well, now that abortion is outlawed, what else can we do? Right? When you're running on a platform of being pro-life and now abortion is outlawed, where do you go from there? So now we're having good faith discussions about access to birth control, emergency contraception. I don't know if you guys saw the Supreme Court ruling in Alabama that basically said that IVF gave personhood to embryos that were conceived through IVF. That's a very technical thing, but several IVF clinics. Do you guys know what IVF is?
Can you give us a one-on-one?
Yeah, so in vitro fertilization is a way that families can have children that is done in a way that, I'm not describing this well, but basically you take an egg and a sperm and you create an embryo. It's frozen until that woman needs it. It's reimplanted into her body. She can conceive that way. So it's a way that families who may be struggling with infertility can still procreate. A lot of families rely on that. So there's a Supreme Court ruling in Alabama that because of some of the statutory guidelines that the legislature had passed said that now they're no longer able to provide that care. People can have, I think, differing arguments on if that was the intent of the law, if that was the intent of the ruling, but when you're talking about something as intimate as having a child, there are a lot of unintended consequences that stem from that. And those conversations are now happening in Missouri. If you believe, as some of the pro-life people do, that life begins at conception, that becomes very murky when you're talking about embryos that are created outside of the body and frozen, right? So maybe I'm relying on IVF for whatever reason, and I have 10 embryos, I'm using one, it works, I have 9 more. I don't know what I'm gonna do with them because we only wanted to have one, but you never know if it's gonna work. The rate of success on IVF is very low. So sometimes you create several embryos, knowing that maybe you only wanna have one kid. Now, if you view those embryos, those frozen embryos, as live children, and that's the narrative that some of my very conservative colleagues feel, that life begins at conception, what does it mean when those 9 embryos have nowhere to go? The laws are starting to say that if you terminate those 9 embryos, that you could be charged with murder of a child. It's very, very sticky, right? So I think in a state like Missouri, where that pro-life narrative has gotten so large, we're going to continue to have to fight these battles. It will be on the ballot either this August or this November, again through the initiative petition process. You guys will have an opportunity to say basically we want to restore abortion and access to reproductive health care in our state, or we don't. That's something you guys get to decide. Through the legislature, it's never going to happen when Republicans have the supermajority because it's something that they've campaigned on. But you guys will get to go vote on that. It passed in Kansas, and every state that has been on the ballot, people have said we don't want doctors involved in that conversation. I don't know if any of you have a loved one who has miscarried, who's had to have an abortion for a medical reason. Most people do know somebody who that's happened to. It becomes a very, very polarizing conversation, but I think in large part people can understand the nuance and that it's incredibly hard to legislate.
I'll ask 2 more questions, then open it up to the floor. In case anybody has any questions, Representative Fogle is happy to answer. And as she said, she said herself, nothing's off limits, so go for it. All right, so anyways, what's happening with transgender rights in the state? There was a piece of legislation I read about last week, was it? About how if you're a public school teacher and you identify a student as anything other than their biological sex, am I getting that right?
Correct.
They can be criminally tried. What's happening?
So, man, you're just asking all the controversial questions. This is my 4th year in Jefferson City. The hot button issues that we debate are typically guns, abortion, and anything related to transgender Missourians. So in my time in Jefferson City, we've debated and passed 2 bills. One that would prohibit any public school athlete from participating in sports that didn't align with their biological sex at birth. And again, stop me if I'm saying something that you're not familiar with or if you want clarifying questions. The second bill that we passed was a bill that prohibited gender-affirming care for minors in our state. If you don't know what that is, it could be things like hormone blockers that would allow somebody who might think that they're transgender to wait until they become 18 to make a decision about what gender they better identify with. This year, we've come back and we've heard a lot of additional bills. One that you referenced would make it to where if you're a teacher, so I'm your teacher, somebody comes in my classroom and one of you comes up to me and says, hey, I've really been struggling with something. I think that I might happen to be a transgender individual. I would like you to address me by this name, or I would like you to address me by these pronouns. If I did that as your teacher, I could be charged and put on the sexual predator or sexual offender registry. So why that's really important, for several reasons. I think first and foremost is that we're putting classroom teachers in an impossible situation. Regardless of how you feel about the issue, if a student is coming to you upset about something and asking you of something, it's really hard to tell that student, hey, I'm sorry, I'm not going to respect your wishes, right? I'm a firm believer that parents should be involved in that conversation. That teacher should bring that family together and have those conversations about how do we want to handle this? You're the parent, you're the grandparent, you're the legal guardian. How do we work together? But there are times when a student may not feel safe telling their parent that, for whatever reason. Good, bad, or indifferent, you all can have your own opinions on that. But if I'm a 10th grader and I walk into a classroom and I've known for 5 years that I was born a biological woman at birth, but I really think that I might be a guy, and I ask my teacher, and my teacher respects that wish, that teacher could have severe legal consequences. That's, again, very murky. That was a colleague of mine from Christian County, so from down here in Springfield, that filed that bill. My guess is something like that wouldn't pass because, it's so nuanced. But those are the kinds of conversations we have in Jefferson City. And it's not specific to individuals who are transgender. We have a lot of conversations about how we should have laws that protect the nuclear family. that laws should prohibit, every year we debate a bill called the Missouri Non-Discrimination Act that basically would say you can't get fired, you can't get kicked out of your home for being gay. That's struck down. My Republican colleagues never vote for that. So it continues to be a very polarizing and very difficult conversation for our chamber to have anytime we talk about any issues related to the LGBTQ community.
Last question from me, and I'm actually reading this from a student. Unfortunately, I can't yank you around to all of my classes, so here's some students from other classes that have written in questions. A student named Reagan Irwin. She asks, would raising minimum wage to $15 an hour just increase the cost of living? If businesses are having to pay their employees more, they would have to raise the cost of their products, leaving the consumers to have to spend more of their money. This would be equal to the same property rate, is what she said. I don't know about that last part, but your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure on the last part, but that's a debate as old as time on if you raise minimum wage, is it just gonna increase costs for everything else and basically be a net neutral for people? I would say that's not what we find anytime we've raised minimum wage. It doesn't innately drive up the cost of everything else. In fact, I think what we're seeing right now is inflation since post-COVID is a struggle, right? I'm sure you guys see it. You go to the store, things cost more. But if we don't raise salaries or raise wages for everybody in tandem with that, then families really struggle. If you're making what minimum wage is now and the cost of everything is moving up and moving up, that gap becomes too big and families are getting priced out of their apartments, they're getting priced out of being able to pay their bills. So I would argue that increasing the minimum wage doesn't increase inflation. Inflation is already increasing, and we need to make sure that all working families, if you're working 40 hours a week and you're working hard, you should be able to take care of your family. I'm a firm believer. That's at the core of why I'm a Democrat and why I am who I am. I don't think anybody working full-time should live in poverty. I don't think anybody should live in poverty. But if you're going out and working 40 hours and you have 2 kids at home and yet somehow you're still living below the poverty threshold, I think your business should pay you more. I think time is valuable and I think workers should have rights. And I think it's really important that if you're going out and holding down a job and wanting to take care of your family back home, or I don't have kids, maybe I just want to take care of myself back home. I shouldn't live below the poverty level. I think that's a broken system and raising the minimum wage helps address it.
All right, any questions, any thoughts right off the bat for Representative Fogle?
Yeah.
How do you feel about the healthcare system in America?
Oh man, that is a incredibly complex question. So, I think I would probably echo my sentiments that I just shared in that I do believe it's a broken system. We pay more for healthcare in this country than any other westernized country. We pay more for our prescriptions in this country than any other westernized country. We have more people that are insured now than ever before, but that doesn't mean they can afford their insurance. And when you see the pockets of people who are uninsured, if you maybe make slightly too much for Medicaid, but you can't afford the private market, or another gap that we have in the healthcare system is for our seasonal or temporary workers, people who farm, for example. That's a huge problem, is not being able to afford insurance when your insurance isn't applied to or tied to your employer. So all that to say, I think that we could do a lot to make sure that we are healthier, that people have access to health care. I think places like Jordan Valley and safety net providers play a huge role in that and making sure people have affordable access to health care. I think there's a lot we could do on the pharmacy cost reform, and those are debates that we have in Jefferson City that are bipartisan in nature. Both sides want to address the cost of prescriptions in this country. But it is a huge system, and lobbyists in that world have lots of money, and it is like steering a ship trying to get anything done on the cost of healthcare. So that was kind of a long-winded way of saying it's a broken system, and I think we need to continue to address it.
More questions?
I have one. It's another controversial one.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on the death penalty?
I'm against the death penalty. I think that there should be severe consequences for violent offenders, and I think that life in prison, well, I know life in prison is more affordable, and I personally don't believe that it should be the role of government to take away somebody's life, and there's a lot of data to support that. Number one, it doesn't increase or decrease crime for states that do or don't have the death penalty, and that sometimes the justice system gets it wrong. And oh my gosh, if a government takes the life of its own citizen and is incorrect on that, to me the risk reward isn't there. So we've had a few debates in Jefferson City about what would it look like if we abolished the death penalty, and I always come down on the side of doing so.
I have a student named Michael Nevels who asked about, quote unquote, the solar garden bill. Maybe you can help us talk about this a little bit. He asks, what are you going to do to make it affordable for the communities to get it up off the ground? First of all, what is it?
Absolutely. So you guys know what solar energy is, I'm sure. You see the big, like, gray slats that are harnessing solar energy. So basically, I have a community solar bill that would just help support communities to be able to tap into solar energy. There are a lot of very smart people who think that only relying on wind or solar is a bad idea because those things, in their opinion, can be unreliable and can be, if there's a big storm or say there's a big rain that happens for 7 days, you're not getting a ton of solar production, right? Same with wind. It's a little, some people believe that it's a little not as reliable, but I think solar is a really good opportunity for people to get energy in a cost-effective way, in a way that supports and protects our environment, that could be an additional option. So that's what my community solar bill does. It allows for communities to come together and provide solar for their areas. There's also, this is like way too technical, but we also debate a lot of bills about taxation of solar and infrastructure of solar. You have kind of utility companies who are hesitant to super support solar, right, because their bread and butter is providing energy to people, and we want to make sure that they have the funds that they need to be successful, because solar isn't going to power everything. But there's kind of this friction between the utility industry and the solar industry. So it's figuring out how do we diversify our energy sources and make sure that consumers who want to have solar, maybe on their residential property or on the business property, can do so without the government intervening, but that we can continue to support a very diverse range of energy options.
Ethan Sales asks, I'm reading in his voice, I saw that you were wanting adequate funding for an expansion of public transportation. Would this be something that would be available for neighboring cities to get adequate transportation to Springfield while taking cars off the streets?
Yeah, so I'm a huge proponent of public transit. I am very frustrated every time my colleagues in St. Louis and Kansas City get to hop on a train and go to Jefferson City. I don't have that option here. We don't have passenger rail that connects us to anywhere. So anytime I'm talking to the Missouri Department of Transportation and there's grant funding available, we're always advocating for how could we connect ourselves to a line that maybe takes us to St. Louis so I can ride up and go to a Blues game, ride up and go to a Cardinals game, and come back home without relying on my car. Same with our public transit system here in Springfield that's governed and run by city utilities. That's a local issue. And our city council and our city utilities board govern what happens at the local level, but I'm always advocating for increased funding in public transit because I think it's a good way of bridging communities with one another and a good way of helping workers get where they need to go who maybe can't afford a car or don't want a car. My brother's in DC, he hasn't had a car in 12 years, he doesn't need one. It's really hard to get by in Springfield if you don't have a car. Taking the bus somewhere, I don't know if any of you have done it, to get from one part of town to the other can take up to 3 hours, one direction, right? If you're a working person making $13 an hour and you're spending 6 hours a day on a bus getting to and from work, that can be super demoralizing. So continuing to invest in public transit, not only locally, but bridging us to other parts of the state and other states, I think would be beneficial to all.
Could you imagine what that would do for the economies of those cities?
Yeah.
What are you doing today? Are you free?